Chancellor Dr. Doraisamy, Vice Chancellor Dr. Surya Prasad, Professor Ajay Kumar, Dr. Sridhar, students, faculties, friends. It's really overwhelming to see so many of you here today. And I'm delighted at the opportunity to talk. So, as you can see, I don't get blamed for everything. That was... let me say, really honestly, it's a great pleasure to be with all of you today. And I was actually discussing with Dr. Doraisamy that when I look at all of you and see that you are from multiple streams, you have engineers, you have people studying business, people studying law, I think even medicine. So I actually told him I am from a very mixed up academic background, as you heard, and I always felt it actually did me some good at the end of my life, that I knew a little bit of many things. And he told me actually that's the new education policy. So obviously I did it accidentally in my youth, but it's, you know, the reason I mention it is today actually, if you hear me out, you will realize why it is important for everybody to have, apart from their own domain knowledge and expertise, a broad sense of the world, a good appreciation of what is happening in their country, and therefore an interest in many, many things. Now, obviously, you know, when I look at so many youthful people in front of me, it's naturally, you know, the feeling that comes out in me is that, you know, sense of optimism, of change, of the future of the country that I see in front of me. And my first point before I actually speak about foreign policy, because it is related to that, I want to drive home to you this message of the enormous change that is taking place in this country today. Change in every possible way, you know, change in its politics, change in its economics, change in the way in which the average citizen gets his or her due, change in the way in which we engage the world. And part of the reason actually for the change is that as a society, you know, as a country, you all know that this is 75 years of our independence. We have moved to a phase where the leadership of the country, for the first time ever, is actually a post-independent generation. Whether you look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whether you look at our president, you look at our vice president, you look at the speaker of our parliament, the bulk of the ministers, the people who actually do policy formulation, or even other realms, education, civil society, business. We have people for whom the earlier era, the colonial era, is behind them. They were born as free citizens of an independent India, and the confidence of that as their starting point today actually allows them to think in much bigger and more confident terms. The second part of the change is actually our democratization. Now, you know, you would be tired by now of people telling you we are a democracy, we are the biggest democracy. Actually, we are, in my view, also the oldest democracy. But there is actually a democratization process in our life. And the democratization process is, if you look today at, again, I'm starting with the leadership of the country. These are all people from ordinary families. These are people who have worked their way up in life, who have come up with great effort on the basis of their merit and experience. But it is not only the people you look up to. I would say in any institution, I mean, even amongst you. Again, to my favorite example is actually the Indian cricket team. You know, the Indian cricket team, once upon a time, by the way, I'm diverting here a bit. You know, I spent part of my life, my early life in Bengaluru. My grandparents used to live there, and We used to come home for holidays. I even did a little bit of my schooling in Bangalore. Interestingly, I told Dr. Doraisamy when I got into government and they sent us out saying, you must learn something about Indian villages. I was actually sent to Chikodi in Belgaum district. So when you're talking about floods in Chikodi and Bagalkot, it's an area, at least I remember from many years ago. But my Bangalore story is this. The first time I ever watched serious cricket was when I was still in school. And the first serious cricketer I saw was actually a schoolboy. It was a person called Sunil Gavaskar. Sunil Gavaskar and Ramesh Nagdev used to open for West Zone school team in those days. I'm now talking of, for you people it'll be history. It's like mid-60s. And I mentioned cricket team. Actually, if you look at the Indian cricket team, what was once an elite sport of Ranjit Singh ji and Dilip Singh ji and C.K. Naidu, today represents the full diversity of India. And I think that is happening in our politics, it's happening in our society, it is happening in our leadership. And this democratization of India is the second, message to you which I give, because to me that is very intrinsic to the change. Now, what does that mean on the ground? What it means on the ground is that our basic expectations of government, of ourselves, of society, they have gone up. That people today are no longer content to wait for basic, for minimal things in life. I mean, a tap connection, a power connection, a gas cylinder, these are not luxuries for people. It should not be. Owning a home is not something that should happen to you at the end of your life with your savings. Owning your home is something which actually every of India must aspire to early in their lives. And actually not aspire to, but actually see it happen in large numbers. So to me, what is the you might say baseline for our society? That is today changing. You have a government, I would say it's not just a government, it is the societal thinking says we can do better than this, we must do better than this, we must aspire higher, we must deliver to our people better. The second is the means to do that. And a lot of that is today technology enabled. When I came in, one of the reasons I was very keen to spend time with the students, they actually, it may be a small thing, they keep your thinking going. And think of really what the digital, I would say, progress of this country has done. I mean, a very large part of what I saw were AI-based applications. Okay, and one at least was a drone-based one. Now, for us, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, the idea that I would walk into a university near Bangalore and see students demonstrate drones and students tell me a range of AI apps would have been inconceivable. And that is the change in just 5 years. Now, it's not a sort of a small thing. It is not what is a low in a bubble or in a local environment it is happening. Look at some of the big achievements. And I remind you of this because we take it for granted. We take it, once something happens, the human mind immediately internalizes it so fast. It's a fact of life. Now, I'll give you an achievement. Today we perhaps don't think about it. But for the rest of the world, it's huge. The fact that there were 2 billion vaccinations done for COVID. The fact that we were one of the first countries. The fact that we were one of the first countries actually to have digital certificates. I was once provoked and it didn't come out well. It looked like I was putting down somebody else. It was not my intention. But the fact is, we went around the world very early, flashing your phone and saying, see, here's my QR code, here's my vaccination certificate. So I'm good. I'm ready to go. And as I said, other people were pulling out pieces of certification, paper certification from the wallets. Now, and it wasn't just the CoWIN platform, and even this 2 billion. One part of it is the scale. But imagine if it was not digitally organized. If you did not know your turn would come at this place at this time in that vaccination center. Today, it is obvious. 5 years ago, it would have been rocket science. It actually would have been science fiction. So, and even the vaccine itself, there was a time when, yes, something new came in the global market. Finally, after 5 years, 10 years, it would have reached India. We were vaccinating along with the rest of the world. We were vaccinating a invented in India vaccine as well as a made in India vaccine. And even that made in India vaccine was made by a company which during this entire period probably was the number one vaccine producer by any standards in the world. So this is also part of the change which all of you today are seeing at the, as you are on the threshold of your work life. And I am sort of spending some time with you emphasizing this because you have to understand that the world is watching us. When I go out in the world, we have our domestic debates, there would be differences, there'd be arguments, all of that happens. People who look at us from a distance, they look at the vaccination. They look, for them, Bangalore itself is a legend. Okay, Bangalore, we tell people that you're from Bangalore, it's like already you are like uplifted a few inches above normal human beings. So the sense today that India is a country on the move, that the talents and skills and the capabilities of India, this has a huge meaning for the world. The second is our own traditional image. The traditional image was we were struggling. We had serious challenges of poverty, challenges of development, challenges of malnutrition, challenges of homelessness. Now today, the world is seeing that all these are being addressed. That if you look at as I said, the tap water connections, the power connection, the urbanization, the housing, and even during COVID, even now when I tell people that the Modi government fed and continues to feed through rations 800 million people, they do not, the number just staggers them. If you tell them money into 400 million accounts, month after month, it's a number. 800 million is Europe and North America put together. 400 million is almost the size of the European Union. These numbers, this scale, a government, a society, a people, and a talent which can do this. This is actually today a very, very different India in the making. And that in many ways is the message that I take out to the rest of the world. Some weeks ago, I was traveling in India, in some other state, I will not mention the name, and a chief minister of that state actually said, what is the foreign minister of India doing in this state? We should be doing foreign policy. Why I travel out? Why am I in Bangalore? Why is it for me so interesting to spend time with you? Because for me, this experience of coming out, of mixing, of being immersed in our own society, of seeing the changes for myself. The young people with whom I saw these startups, For me, somewhere they will fit into a conversation I will have somewhere in the world. I will actually be telling some other foreign minister or some other prime minister or some other government saying, I actually saw my students in this university looking at how to use drones for better agriculture production. Or, lot of it, physiotherapy, some of the AI applications that I saw today. So one part of it is, of course, for me, the immersion tells me, it continuously validates for me that huge churning, that sense of change which is going on in the country. Second, of course, your enthusiasm communicates to me. So every time I come to a place like this, for me, it's like recharging your batteries. I go out there much more convinced, much more enthusiastic, much more confident about our own capabilities. Now, why am I telling you all of this? I am telling you this because I saw a lot of very interesting, very thoughtful questions about foreign policy. I appreciate them deeply. I want to give you 2-3 basics of what we do, because that is it's around those basic objectives that we organize ourselves. And some of those basics have changed. Some of them are perennial, they are permanent. Obviously, foreign policy is meant to secure your country. So you try to have good relations with everybody, and just in case things don't work out well, you also have insurance policy with having good relations with other people with whom you have good understandings, or you can get military equipment or technology, or you can get political friendships which serve you well in time of difficulty. So the security part of it has always been there. It is there for every country and will always be so. The part, and obviously every country, every society likes to project itself. You want brand India to be known through the world. But the part which has changed, and has changed particularly in the last 8 years. One, foreign policy today is very focused on how do I use the world to drive my national development faster. How do I get capital? How do I get technology? How do I get best practices? How do I find ways by which my country moves up the ladder, progresses very much faster than it would do otherwise. The second, of course, is foreign policy is about knowing the world and, in a sense, doing a risk assessment. Because if your foreign policy and your risk assessments go wrong, then you're actually putting your country, your society at risk, in danger. And there have been times for us. The fact was that the events before 1962 led to a war in 62, out of which India came out very, very badly. In 1965, again, there were issues. We came out of it much better. When 1971 and 1999 happened, our leaderships were much stronger. So today, to assess the world, to read the world, to look at both the opportunities and the challenges it offers, that is something which is very, very important. But the third part of it is really, in a globalized world, how does foreign policy make your life better? And I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. Today, every one of us is affected by the price of petrol at the petrol pump. Now, one way of keeping that in some control is actually foreign policy. The fact that we have the ability, the confidence, the strength of purpose to negotiate what is in the best interest of the country, and it is in the best interest of the Indian people, is something which is clearly an outcome of foreign policy. Let me give you a second example. It is an example I think Dr. Doraisamy also mentioned. You have conflict situation. It happened in Ukraine with our students. It happened in Afghanistan, where we had both our own people as well as, minority communities there who identified with us. It has happened in a number of other places. It happened even during COVID, where so many really lakhs of Indians were stranded outside the country. So foreign policy here is to use your relationships to look after your people, to bring your people back. The one message which I heard from everybody coming out of Ukraine was, if we carried the Indian flag, we were okay. Now, that to me is foreign. A third was COVID itself. We won friends, we won hearts by sharing what we had in terms of medicine and vaccines. But I must in all fairness recognize, during 2021 summer, when the Delta wave was on, the world also stood by us. That the number of countries who actually flew in, if I saw what US did or Europe did, or what the Japanese did, I mean, a lot of them really also, it was, you could say, goodwill, accumulated goodwill over many years. But sometimes it could be something very specific. There was a huge demand for oxygen at that time. Every state, every hospital was pushing for oxygen. And our big problem was where we produced oxygen, which are generally in the remote areas of the country, not where we consumed oxygen. So oxygen itself was in short supply, medical oxygen, and supplying it within, distributing it within our country was a huge problem. And we actually got oxygen shipped from a number of countries, actually using diplomacy. So it could have been a Qatar and a Kuwait, or a Singapore, or a Japan. I mean, a lot of these countries again, and sometimes even big businesses actually offer to ship us. So today, what happens in the world? A distant event is in Ukraine is raising fuel and food prices. A happening like the COVID, which we never anticipated, came home to each one of us. Anything we use in daily life today, some part of it may be made in India, but somewhere some of it is coming from outside. So we are getting very deeply connected to the world. Because we are so deeply connected to the world, we must understand the world. We must read it right. If we read it right, the world opens up for us. I mean, I've spoken about trade. One of the areas which Prime Minister Modi is pushing very hard is to make sure that actually the world opens up for us as a workplace. That our talent, our skills, our corporates are able to go out in the rest of the world and work on equal terms with the citizens of those countries. So one of our big focus today is actually mobility agreements and work opportunities for our students and for our interns abroad. So the sense I wish to share with you in my overall remarks was, this is a globalized era. The world matters to us. Whatever you study, whichever domain you are in, it matters much more than when we were your age. And if we understand the world well, many more opportunities open up for us. If we do not understand the world, actually there are many dangers out there which could threaten our well-being. So I would urge you all, whatever you are studying, pay attention. Somewhere in your lives, keep looking at the world. Give some attention to what is happening. And see how that also fits in with the changes that are taking place in our own society. Because today, the vision that we have, the leadership that we have, the ambitions that we have, these are very different. I'm not suggesting to you that the world is without its challenges. In fact, between COVID and the Ukraine conflict and a lot of other uncertainties, it's a tough place. But it is a tough place that we in India face with confidence, because we have that leadership today, that experience today, that sense that, the decisions which this country are making are the right decisions, are the decisions of experience, the decisions of prudence, but still decisions of ambition and of optimism. So that is the sense I wanted to communicate. Really, it's again to be with all of you today, and then perhaps we could move to the question session. Thank you very much.